Many people talk about how a great musician Amy Winehouse was despite the drug addiction that took her life, but little is said about the musical context of her albums and how truly big her impact was on the music industry. I'm Ricky, and in this video I will tell you why Amy Winehouse's work is much more relevant than the exploration they do about her struggles and short life. First, let's get to know her background and later understand her musical legacy. Amy Jade Winehouse was born in a family of parents related to professional jazz musicians that not only influenced her musical taste from a young age, but encouraged her to develop artistic skills. She would attend art schools, taking acting, vocal, and dance lessons. It is reported that initially she couldn't sing well, but later developed a jazzy singing that got her into the National Youth Jazz Orchestra. Also, she learned to play guitar and started to write music. Amy knew most of the jazz canon and the standards repertoire, drawing influences from jazz singers like Frank Sinatra, Sarah Vaughan, Thelonious Monk, and Dinah Washington. But she wasn't just limited to jazz and had great influence from other genres, especially those with black roots like soul, gospel, R&B, hip-hop, Jamaican music. Amy started her career at a time when the market was investing more and more in a type of jazz-inspired music that crossed the adult contemporary field. The rise of neo soul in the late 90s and early 2000s played a significant role for this trend, especially with British soul and acid jazz artists that influenced names like D'Angelo and Erykah Badu. Neo soul's focus on live instrumentation, intricate arrangements, soulful and jazzy vocals created a fertile ground for the exploration of jazz influences. Amy's debut album Frank, named after Frank Sinatra and released in 2003, became part of the movement as it was heavily based on neo-soul and R&B music, but with greater emphasis on jazz features that she was very familiar with.
It's very jazz influenced, but it's got very much the new as well. It's very hip hop, it's very beat driven. Just everything I've kind of listened to over the past 20 years, I'm only 19, everything I've ever listened to is rubbed off hopefully the right way, like Frank Sinatra, all the jazz greats, Sarah Vaughan and all that, and then hip hop people, KRS-One and LL Cool J when he was younger, Salt-N-Pepa, I used to love them, and Left Eye, she was one of my proper idols when I was young, and Mos Def, like everything from the old but the new as well, it's very crossover.
It's told that after she became part of Simon Fuller's management, the same who managed Spice Girls and created the Idols reality show, various major labels saw interest on her. She ended up going to Island Records, who provide great producers, some who worked on the music education of Lauryn Hill, like Commissioner Gordon and Salaam Remi, who was also at the Fugees, The Score, and who became Amy's main producer. Others worth to mention is Matt Rory from the Spice Girls album and Sophie Ellis-Bextor's Murdered on a Dance Floor, and Jimmy Hogarth, who after became a great producer of adult contemporary crossovers. Winehouse co-wrote all the songs except two covers. Frank shows Amy's complex and contradictory figure, a woman dissatisfied with her partner who is not afraid to express her opinions, even though it may sound rude. She wants a serious love but doesn't want to get attached. Others are meant to play the masculine role, but is too rebellious and foul-mouthed to play the submissive role given to women. Later, she wouldn't say the most positive things about the album, mainly due to a certain lack of creative control, but Frank was well received by the critics and received numerous accolades from the most prestigious British awards. Commercially, the album grew over the years and is one of the first representatives of the jazz trend I talked before. Frank was released just after Norah Jones' debut Come Away With Me from 2002, which is possibly the first jazz-inflected pop album released outside the neo soul field. In 2003, the year of Frank, we had a lot of these works coming out, and debuts like Michael Bublé, Joss Stone, Katie Melua, and Jamie Cullum, the last two who were also promoted alongside with Amy. Most of them came from the British industry, and they brought jazz-influenced music to a wide range of listeners based on adult contemporary crossover in the mainstream market. Before we continue, please don't forget to like the video so I can reach more people that also like music. I appreciate your attention. With so many artists having success with this style, how did Amy Winehouse stand out not only as an agent of this movement, but as one of the most celebrated singers of the century? The answer is on Amy's second album, Back to Black, her definite entry into the pop mainstream and international breakthrough. This album was itself a great event and also part of a new trend that was beginning. In fact, I would say that's how jazz-influenced music was manifesting in mainstream pop. The 2000s is known for being the R&B era in pop music, which is a way of talking about the dominance of black music on the charts. During the mid-2000s, adult contemporary jazz sound would extrapolate to pop and be expressed through funk and soul, especially the style of James Brown and Motown. This was the approach that Amy chose and which resulted in the best-selling album of 2006. Note that all started with neo soul in the beginning of the decade that evolved into a return to the classic soul of the 60s and 70s. Also, I'm talking about that not just to give a context, but for you to understand that part of her success happened because her art was aligned with the industry, like happened with any other singer in the history. Amy had a legitimate background in her artistic choices and she personally contributed to these trends, but pop culture in mid-2000s was taken over by various cultural products with references to jazz, Motown, old Hollywood, and so on. Motown girl groups such as the Shangri-Las and the Ronettes were among Amy's biggest early influences. She rediscovered their music while hanging out at Camden's pubs, also the place where she met her future husband Blake Fielder Seville. A breakup period would be the inspiration behind the dark lyrics she was writing, added to the beginning of her drug addiction that unfortunately became part of her public persona.
I'm quite influenced by whatever I listen to, like a lot of doo-wop, a lot of 60s soul, Motown, girl groups. You know, I had a bit of time off, all I did was go and play pool all day in a pub. I guess so it's all jukebox music.
Based on these musical references, Amy matured her visuals to create her iconic look, a type of punky pin-up or rebel Motown girl. Messy beehive hair with striking makeup, a tattoo body containing marks of her addiction, and 50s and 60s dresses made Amy an unforgettable rock star that embodied the antithesis style of her music.
With Frank, it was this sort of vintage jazz singer, like vintage clothing, pin-up girl, but sort of, you know, nicey-nicey. And she was like, no, I'm a rebel, I'm a punk, this is not like me. And completely rebelled against it, and that's when she started getting tattoos, and then the hair started getting bigger, and then it sort of turned into a small beehive, and then the beehive was just slowly getting bigger and bigger.
Added to Remi's production, Mark Ronson, who at the time was still making a name for himself, was a key figure in this project, beyond the backup voice and instrumentation of Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. The result was a vintage modern album that mixed jazz, soul, R&B, pop, and sometimes reggae and ska. The content lyrics was similar to Frank in a way that tells about a self-destructive and complex woman dealing with the misadventures of love. But the sad lyrics are balanced with infectious and sometimes upbeat melodies, like many soul records from the 60s and 70s. Back to Black became the best-selling album of 2006, even though it was released later that year. It was critically acclaimed and received several awards, including 5 Grammys. Amy was on top, but her mental health worsened in the following years. Apart from some festivals and few collaborations, her last years were marked by cancellations and disastrous concerts. The support of her goddaughter Dionne Bromfield and Tony Bennett's duet is probably her most successful work from that time. Also, the posthumous album Lioness Hidden Treasures gives an idea of what the successor to Back to Black that we never had would be like. If you are liking the video and want to support my work, please subscribe to my channel. I will be very grateful to have you following my videos, and I promise to improve more and more, especially my English. Now back to the team. When Amy got international recognition, her struggles were heavily spectacularized and attacked by the media, from bloggers to comedy shows around the world. Since her death in 2011, the explanation of why she succumbed to drugs seems to be the biggest point of interest for the public, leaving her impact to the music industry in the background. As I said, Back to Black was released in a context where the music market was pushing for more pop soul records, especially from adult contemporary crossover artists. It's hard to define how influential Back to Black was, but we can define two moments that the album was a highlight: its promotional years and the movement that followed after. In the mid-2000s, new English singers influenced by jazz and soul music continued to enjoy global relevance, such as Lily Allen, Corinne Bailey Rae, and James Morrison. In fact, at the time, Lily Allen was seen as a more restrained counterpart to Amy Winehouse. But without a doubt, a new wave of British soul singers came after Back to Black's success. And the list is big, but I will highlight some names. Most who have cited Amy as an inspiration: Duff, Florence and the Machine, Paloma Faith, Estelle, Leona Lewis, and the biggest one, Adele. Some consider them part of a third British invasion, which would grow stronger in the following years with teen-oriented acts. But initially, they were most pop soul artists making a type of vintage and Afro-American inspired pop music. We can mention some American names like Janelle Monáe and Jasmine Sullivan, but we see more new and established artists surfing that wave again around 2013 and 14 after Adele's smash album 21. And here I include Sam Smith, Emily Sandé, Robbie Williams, Justin Timberlake, Bruno Mars, Charlie Puth, Meghan Trainor, Ariana Grande's first albums, and many other names that in some way entered into this throwback sound. As I talked, it's too pretentious to say that Amy was responsible for all this jazz and soul trend, but if we just look the sales, Back to Black and 21 were the best sellers and most acclaimed among all. Even today, after this trend passed on mainstream, we have artists like Georgia Smith and Ray who had mentioned Amy as a reference. She is definitely one of the most influential artists of this century, and it's no wonder that Back to Black is one of the most recent albums to frequently appear on lists of the best albums of all time. At least Amy received recognition during her lifetime and later, despite her troubled relationship with the mainstream media. But I still think that the big impression should be her musical work and not her personal troubles, since she was much more than the bad example that moralists like to use. What is that album or artist that you feel some Amy Winehouse inspiration? Please tell me in the comments, and thank you for watching. I have other video analysis on my channel like this that you can check it out right now. Go watch!